Hi everybody, welcome back to Old Pete Gaming. I'm your host Old Pete. Now let's get into another tutorial for Steel Division 2. So this is the second in a series of tutorials that I'm doing to try and help new and intermediate players upgrade their skills enough to where they can compete in this game and, really take their skills to the next level. And so my goal here is really focusing mostly on the opening moves to explain my thinking when I decide what to bring where in a battle. So without further ado, when you fall into a game of Steel Division, you're faced with the need to place various units and get them to the front line as quickly as possible. So if you look at where I'm trying to deploy, you'll see I'm really trying to push the front line as much as possible here. And the reason for that is because the way you win in Steel Division 2 is to control more flags than your opponent. And when you do that, you tick down his score. So I know I need to get troops to the front line, but what should I bring where? I like to break the map down in my head into, say, 3 to 5 sectors. I'm going to consider this area over here, these woods, to be one sector. I'm going to consider this sort of town area and this open area to be another. I'm going to consider this big valley here to be another sector. And then there's this sort of part of the valley that's isolated from the rest of the valley by these woods, and I'm going to consider this my fourth sector. And so looking at each sector, I can now visualize what I want to do in each sector. So in this particular sector here, I have a Stug E3, which is not a tank, it's an assault gun. It has a short-barreled howitzer gun on it. It's not made to take out armor. It's made to take out lighter enemy support units, such as machine guns, light anti-tank guns, support guns, things like that. And so having him come here, I want him to stay out of line of sight of any AT or tanks that are able to get up here. And I want him to just sort of cruise up here to the very edge, to where he can start providing support to anything that shows itself along this tree line in terms of machine guns or anti-tank guns, because clearly he's going to bring stuff in here to try and defend this open area, this crossing here, this road. Roads are key in this game because it's how you get troops to the front lines. If I'm looking at this map, I'm realizing that to get to this spot, I have to bring in troops here or here, and I have to take this lateral road to get to this spot. So it's a much further travel to get to this spot, and then there is no road past this point. I'd have to just go cross country. So that means any movement here is going to be very slow, and slow movements are easier to counter. You see them coming and you have more time to react. So most of the fighting is going to be concentrated, you'll find, along your offensive feeding roads that you use to feed troops to the battlefield. This conforms very nicely to dividing this into 4 sectors, because each sector essentially has one supply road. Now, be careful when you're deploying your troops. Don't just take troops that you want to go right here and pluck them down and expect them to come in on the correct road. Oftentimes the roads are set up so that if you do that, it will actually intentionally come in on the wrong road and take much, much longer to get here. You can see how much more travel there is for a truck coming up this road to get over to here than here. These roads are much more direct. So you'll want to bring in your reinforcements closer to the actual start of the road and then direct them up to the front line. That's how you avoid having them come in on the wrong road. In terms of over here, let's look at what I've brought. I brought in my support gun. I've already explained that. I've brought in this machine gun. I'm having him go here with the intention of then moving him up to essentially do what I'm expecting my opponent to do, which is have machine guns guarding this open area so that nothing can easily cross. And then I have a anti-tank gun that I'm going to be doing a similar thing into these woods to cover the open area again. I want to have something to defend against infantry, and I want to have something to defend against tanks, and I want to have something to defend against enemy support weapons. But then I also have selected this flag to be one that I want to push. So to do that, I can't just drive down this road, because as you can see from the front line, he's much closer to this flag than I am. By the time I drive to this midpoint, he's likely going to be able to start having troops deployed in this area. If I just try and drive straight in here, I'll be killed. So to get there, what I've had my unit do is I've actually told it to pull off the road here and drive cross country along this edge and then move across the open and deploy into this woods. And as you can see, any support weapons or AT weapons, machine guns, they're not going to have a lot of line of sight on him. It's very unlikely he'll be able to get anything into here to cover this in the time it will take this vehicle to get to here. So what sort of troop am I bringing there? I'm bringing this Stoss troop. This unit, it's a 5-man unit, This particular division, their STOS troops have MP-44s, which is an assault rifle that can shoot 300 meters. Most STOS troop that you'll find in German divisions have submachine guns that only fire 100 meters. Those units that can only fire 100 meters, they're made for one of two things. Being in a building where there is very little line of sight that would allow a unit to see it before it gets right up on it. But the main spot to use those in are in very deep forest. If you look here in this forest, I can only see 100 meters. And so any unit that comes into the range of, say, my STOS troop that has submachine guns, the STOS troop will be able to engage. If I have the STOS troop here, anything that's here in this field, even right here, will be able to see it and fire on it. And a normal STOS troop with just submachine guns, they'll just sit there and take fire because they can't engage. It's outside of their 100-meter range. Beyond their primary weapon, this unit also has a Molotov cocktail. It's a bottle filled with gasoline that's had some stuff added to it to make it sticky. And so when you throw it, it lays down this big blanket of burning, sticky fire. You can imagine what that would be like to be coated in that. And again, that weapon only has 100 meters range. So again, it's made to engage in that sort of scenario. That's why I'm bringing it here. I'm actually expecting him to bring something in here and try to move it to the front. And what I want to do is I want to take that unit that only has 100 meters range, and I want to keep it as limited as possible in its line of sight and move it so that when it stumbles upon whatever he's brought here, it will be able to throw its Molotov cocktails, engage with its MP-44s, and terminate whatever he's brought to defend this flag, and that will allow me to then start opening this area up to further reinforcements. So that's the plan there. In the town, you can see that I'm doing a couple things. I'm actually being pretty aggressive. I'm being more aggressive here than I would in most games, and the reason for that is because I know that my opponent is playing the 12th Tartalik. 12th Tartalik is a Hungarian deck, and their trucks are these monstrosities that are far slower than the trucks that my troops come in. So I am actually being far more aggressive in this game than I might normally be. So again, you can see here, I'm actually taking a STOS troop and I'm moving them into this spot. These guys can fire 300 meters with their MP-44, so I don't need to keep them at 100 meters. If I did, I'd put them probably like right here. Right there would be another good spot, because you're probably not going to have anything coming from you at this direction, especially at the opening. You're going to be dealing with stuff that's coming down this road. It's going to be house-to-house fighting in this town, assuming I can get into this position. What you want there is units that are going to dominate in the close to mid-range, and you know, the MP-44s certainly fit that description. Beyond that, you'll see that I'm also taking one and very aggressively moving up to this flag. The reason I'm doing that is because if you look, when he's coming down this road, he almost has no view on this road. So this road is surprisingly safe for the opening of the battle to get something into here so that I can then contest this flag. So I'm contesting this flag. I'm even kind of contesting this, starting to contest this flag. I want a foothold. I don't want him to be able to put long range troops in these buildings and be able to fight me at a distance here, because he actually has some pretty decent long-range units in his deck. And so I want to take advantage of the fact that I have, in my opinion, the better openers for close quarters engagement and really press on that advantage. I'm also bringing another support gun and a Stug 3G, which can take out armor. It's comparable to a Panzer IV, except it doesn't have a turret, and it has heavier frontal armor, which is perfect for this spot because there's not really a lot of opportunity for the enemy to flank that unit. So he doesn't have to turn fast. He'll be able to just fire down this road, give nice support, and really punish anything that tries to contest this house that I put those STOS troops in. So that's the plan there. Get support units in this town, contest the edge of this town with close quarters units that can fight house to house, contest this flag with close quarters units that can dominate in this forest. That's the plan. These machine guns, I'm putting these in buildings that have long range down that road, so they can provide fire support to that STOS troop. I'm trying to make it so that the enemy more or less starts coming under fire from all my units in the same spot. This half of the map, these two sectors, there's a lot of close quarter fighting, right? A lot of forests. Here you have the opposite. This is a battle of big open areas. Like, just look at how far you can shoot here. I mean, if you're up on this hill, if you're a 88 millimeter gun, you can fire all the way to the edge of the other hill there. And so what I'm bringing there to just dominate that open space is a Tiger. This is a heavy tank. They're around 130 points, but they have 2,000 meters range. So if I put him here, he can fire all the way to this spot, which means anything that comes around this corner will be under fire. And this is a little trick here too. Right here you have a slope. Okay, this is actually quite sloped if you look at the terrain. That's steep. If you have a tank that is right here, its chassis is going to be angled to the slope of the ground. And this game is realistic enough that a tank in that angle will not be able to elevate its gun enough to fire. Same with AT guns. So I'm purposefully making my tank engage things that are on that slope, because even if they're in range, they won't be able to fire because of the slope. And meantime, they'll be under fire from my Tiger. I believe I'm probably putting an AT gun here because this is an excellent spot to put an AT gun. You might say, well, why would you bother? And you can see I have an AT gun here. Why would you bother bringing an AT gun up, especially the 76 millimeter? It only fires 1,500 meters, and you can see I'm trying to limit its range to more or less precisely that 1,500 meters. Limit the range of your units to that they can see to the range that they can fire. That's a huge tip that you can take away. The reason I'm bringing this, even though I have a Tiger which has a better gun and will be much more effective, is the Tiger is much slower. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm really trying to catch his transports out on the road before they can get to this town. And if I rely on the Tiger, they'll get to this town before he's ever up here to engage. And so I'm bringing that specifically for the open. Try and snipe transports on that road and provide fire to the other units that I'm trying to push into the town. So on that note, you can see I'm bringing some Stoss Troop. Normally Stoss Troop is not something that I would bring here, but these have MP44s, and so I don't have to worry about, you know, the enemy deploying a rifle unit here and being able to take free shots at unit in this building that only has 100 meter range, because the MP44s have 300 meter range. So they're very good for this sort of urban combat where it's going to be close, but you're also going to have a lot of moments where they see further than 100 meters. So I'm going to put those Stoss Troop. You can see I'm bringing the Stoss Troop one here, and then I'm bringing another along this road. And again, I'm trying to make it so that its travel is exposed as little as possible to potential enemy fire. You can see that if they have units up here, there will be a moment where this vehicle will be exposed, but it takes time for enemy AT guns and tanks to acquire their target and fire. So what I'm gambling is that this vehicle moves fast enough and this gap where that you can see there is short enough to not allow them enough time to fire and kill that unit. So hopefully I can get another Stoss Troop in here. Again, I want him in these woods and put pressure on these two flags. We have already covered where everyone else is going except for this Glide Pioneer. Pioneers have explosive charges or hand grenades. Same with engineers on the Allied side. You know, there are different names for it. These units have an explosive charge that they can throw 100 meters. Those are really made to engage, again, in heavy cover, where anything that comes into view is going to be in range for them to throw that charge. It's going to be really powerful here having that teamed up with the Stoss Troop that have the Molotov cocktails, because the Molotov cocktails fire very fast. So if we come upon a unit, those Molotov cocktails will be able to get off. And if it's a flamethrower unit, what that means is that there's a good chance that they will be dealing with the Stoss Troop and firing their flamethrower at them, and potentially allow my Pioneers to get their grenade off and wipe out the enemy squad. If that grenade goes off on top of your unit, they will die. And so what I'm not bringing to these fights, you'll notice, is rifle units. Panzer Grenadiers, right? Grenadiers, Panzer Grenadiers, Shadrins, you know, all of those units that are made to shoot 500 to 750 meters. Those units you want to have in a building that can see 500 to 750 meters. You want them in light cover where they can see a fair ways off, right? What you don't want to do is push them up into the face of units that are designed to fight in this heavy cover. If you can at all avoid it, don't push rifle units that don't have Molotovs or flamethrowers or explosive charges into heavy woods. The only way you can pull that off is if you have some sort of support, an airstrike, artillery that can suppress the enemy units that are in the woods enough to where your rifle unit can go up on the suppressed unit and surrender it. If you don't do that, they will die. Don't bring rifle units to fight in heavy cover. And then finally, because I'm bringing that Tiger and the AT gun here, and it's such a huge investment, I am investing in AA at the open. If I can grab this town, which is his flag starting off, right? And I can grab this end of it also. It's going to be very hard for it to be retaken because I'm going to have such good long-range fire support with that Tiger and that AT gun up on this ridge, and it's going to be nearly impossible to get anything up this road to retake the flag. So that's what the hope is. Finally, and you can tell that I'm not prioritizing this sector at all. You don't prioritize every sector in this game. You'll spread yourself too thin. In sectors that you're not prioritizing, just bring enough to defend. I'm bringing a machine gun, and I'm bringing one of those cheap support stugs. These are only 35 points, so it's a very effective unit to just help me hold off any sort of push in this area long enough that I could get reinforcements up here. So now that I've explained the logic, we'll look at my opponent, what he's doing. So sort of as I was predicting, he is bringing machine guns and AT guns up to these woods, which is, perfectly reasonable. But I will say he's overinvested in artillery. I highly recommend you don't do this. You can see that he has brought 1, 2, 3, 4 75 millimeter howitzers. That's not an effective use of your points at the start. Don't focus on bringing a lot of artillery. A cheap mortar or something can do a lot of work for you, especially those 15-point support mortars. Bring those all day long to help you out in clearing out a patch of woods or a built-up urban area. Those are great. They can put real fast fire support on your enemies, and they're very cheap. But to invest huge amounts of points at the open in artillery is a mistake because you need units to push the front line. 300 points on artillery, that's almost half your budget for your opening, which means that your opponent will likely be able to have almost twice as many troops at the front line. That is not a good outcome for you. You can see here he is bringing, looks like a unit to support from this woods, probably a machine gun or AT gun. He's not really microing the transport well here. It's going to be very exposed here, right? There's a lot of opportunities for this to potentially get shot at and destroyed as it's making its way there. It probably won't, just because similar phenomenon where it's actually like this patch where it's quite shielded. But that said, if it were me, I would manually tell it to come here, and I would stay maybe all the way to here until I got out, and then just move it up through the woods to here. That's a much safer way to approach that spot than to allow them to drive along the frontage of this forest where they could be shot. In the town, you can see he's making a huge mistake here. He's not pushing his frontline flag, and it's probably because he has spent so much on artillery that he doesn't feel he has the troops to pull it off, or maybe he just is aware that this map is very unbalanced and that it's unlikely that he'll get in there because I'm going to have support units up on this. So it's possible he's decided to not try and contest it, but that's a big mistake. He could come in here, right? And you could actually infiltrate through here quite easily. Not super easily, but easily enough. Like, my Tiger's not going to see that, right? If he brings troops in here, infiltrates through here, and then brings them up through the buildings, you can do that. Bring a couple of fast units to try and grab some of these houses up at your front line and contest that flag, because if your opponent has more flags than you, you're going to lose points, you're going to get ticked down, and eventually you'll just get bled to death. Beyond that, also not trying to contest this flag, which belongs to him, which is a mistake. He should contest it. That means that the units that I'm putting in here are going to immediately exert control on this flag. I'll know he doesn't have anything. The front line will be like here, and I'll know that, I can infiltrate all the way up into this forest potentially and make it much harder for him to contest this flag. Contest every flag that you own already, okay? If I'm him, I am going to contest this flag, this flag, this flag, this flag, and this flag, and I'm going to figure out where to push. Probably on this side. Bring some units, try to get them up to fight at the edge of this town, the way I'm doing here, right? Maybe try and bring some units up similar to what I'm doing over on the flank, get them up into these woods to try and push on this flag. These are tougher, right? If you're him, these are tough, and that's one of the reasons that this map is so unbalanced. If you look at it, I'm pushing all these pretty convincingly at the open, which is going to shift it from, if I capture all of those, it'll shift it from 12-12 to 17-7? 17-7. That's a recipe for you losing the battle in the first 10 minutes of the game. That's what that is. So don't do that. Contest every flag you have and figure out a couple flags to push. The reason, again, though, why it's so unbalanced is, let's say he successfully, he does what he needs to do and he pushes these 2 flags. These are very hard to push, so he's only at 1410, and that's a single tick. Instead of, if you have 15-9, you're at double ticking, right? So let's go ahead and play this out. You know, an even bigger mistake he's making here with his artillery is he's not doing anything with it right away. You know, I mean, have those. You can actually, when you're deploying your troops, there should be an option at the bottom that says deploy without transports. And so in the case of these, I would have actually just deployed these without their transports, and that way you could actually queue up whatever move it is you wanted them to do, whatever fire support mission. If you're going to bring this many, I would think you're going to use them to try and fire on one of the supply roads in order to unload some of the trucks and disrupt it, right? So I'm lucky that he didn't see this and tell it to target that, because this guy probably would have been wiped out if he had. But fortunately, he focused on the AirSats machine gun, and that's allowing this guy to really do good work. Remember, this is the guy who's made to take out these sorts of units. They fire very fast. They have good high explosive round, decent armor for what they are and what they're facing. And so it's going to make short work of those guys. Here he's put a spotter, and he's brought this rifle unit up. Here you can see it does have a Bren, which is nice. It's an automatic rifle, so it will be able to at least fire within 100 meters. You can see the Molotov go off and how quickly that just wipes out enemy units. I will definitely want him to reload before he engages with the rifle unit, so I've told him to stop. And here you see the problem with these rifle units. They don't have the firepower to compete with a unit that's made to fight close range, and they just get suppressed. You know, they took that Molotov and it put them almost all the way to suppression. They get suppressed. They don't have a leader unit near them. They get surrendered. That's typically how forest fights go if you have a rifle versus close range specialty unit. So one thing you'll notice, he does have his artillery firing now. But they're so far back that they are very, very ineffective. The spread on their rounds is covering this whole area. If you were going to do this and bring all that artillery, you should have it much closer to the front line where it can have a tighter grouping and actually destroy some things. Now, one thing you'll notice here is that this unit is not firing. And the reason it's not firing is because he has this unit. You can see with this little red reticle. What that means is he has this AT gun on efficient shot. So it can actually see my assault gun here. But it's not firing because it's calculating that as too low of a chance to penetrate. Take your AT guns off of efficient shot. Take your tanks off of efficient shot. The only thing it usually does is prevent them from firing in the first place. So I highly recommend you don't use efficient shot. I understand the logic behind it, right? You want to hold your fire until you think you can penetrate. That makes sense on paper. But in this game, at least the way it's implemented, it's usually a disaster. I highly recommend you just take efficient shot off. Otherwise, you end up with situations like this. He was firing quite a bit on that AT gun, so I'm falling it back. There's no need to just leave your units where they'll get murdered. So I'm spreading everything out. This guy was suppressed, so I fell him back. When they're falling back, they take less damage. So you can see the dividends that it paid contesting this town. I've now cleared out this whole strip. So instead of having my front line be here, I'm defending here. He's at 18-6 because he hasn't taken steps to preserve his control over his frontline flags. And I've literally captured every single one of them. All of his frontline flags are in my hands at this point, which means he's being triple ticked. If you see these 3 arrows here, that means he's losing 3 ticks per second, which means this is going to be over in 4 minutes. So you can see here, this is getting dicey for these guys, and I see how much he has here. You know, I do have enough units here that I can see what he has. I see what I'm up against. I see all the martyrs, 3 martyrs, 2 80mm AA guns. Like, it's a lot of firepower here. And so in that situation, rather than trying to just hold the front line and do a heroic contest here, what I'm really going to do is just try to make a fighting retreat. I'm going to slowly give up ground here and let him come in and then engage him, slow him down, pull back, and I'm playing for time, and I'm trying to get him to bring units up to where they have to fight in areas that are disadvantageous. You can see here I've got this guy to try and snipe anything that comes in on this road, and so I'm being very defensive here. I was aggressive at first, and then I shift to defense. You never want to just keep pushing all the time, because you'll simply get your troops destroyed if you push too far. You'll be too close to the enemy spawn. He'll be able to bring in a ton of stuff, overwhelm you. And you can see I am bringing in a couple of units here, mainly as a scouting mission. I want to see what's here and be able to let my Tiger engage it. Now that this machine gun has exposed itself, this Tiger can engage. I'm bringing up the ersatz machine guns. And so I did all that with a couple of very cheap 20-point infantry units, instead of, say, driving my Tiger here and finding out that he had an AT gun here, getting surprised and losing an expensive unit. I'm able to do that with fairly cheap units. Again, I don't have nearly what I need to maintain control here, so I'm just trying to slow him down. And one of the ways I'm doing that, I know he has a lot of armor, a lot of armored cars, a lot of tank destroyers, and so I've put this guy in position so that when they come up that road, he'll be able to fire his Panzerfaust. And that's what's going to happen. Boom, one dead AT car. Now what he's doing here, he sees the timer. He knows he has a minute, 30 seconds. So if you look at his orders, he's just ordered everything in this area to just push forward in a desperate attempt to retake territory and stop this bleed out. But all that happens is it allows this guy to use his, I mean, he's out of Panzerfaust at this point because of how much he's able to destroy. You can see the burning Martyr and the burning armored cars. And again, I'm just playing for time here because I know in a minute it's over. But it's never a good idea to just select all your units and give them an attack move forward. It's a recipe for losing your units. You want to micro your units. You want to move them in such a way that they are able to provide supporting fire for the other unit. And if you just have a pile of units and you just like pile it in, boys, it's not going to work. It's going to be a big mess. You know, this is just asking for like an airstrike. I'm actually surprised I'm not seeing a bomber come in right now. It's probably because he has these AA guns. I know it's not going to work, but if I had artillery on the field, you can bet I would be pounding this spot into oblivion. Again, this is why you don't shove armor up without infantry. Let your infantry go first through the buildings. Go house to house with close quarter infantry and clear the houses, and then bring your armor up. So you can see there, battle's over. Surprisingly close in terms of KD, not very close in flags, and the reason for that simply was because he did not contest his frontline flags at the open, and he did not bring the right kinds of units to contest those flags. And that is the end of this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some good information out of it. Thanks for joining. This has been Old Pete Gaming, and I'll see you again later.